All right, some more breaking news to bring you, and Leo is checking her phone because it would appear as if major internet services are down. Amazon, at least, is down. Snapchat down, as well as Robinhood. The Amazon Web Services have said recently that we can confirm an increased error rate and latencies for multiple AWS services in the US East 1 region. Of course, Amazon Web Services, which is the provider for many companies, back-end web service, is down and having some difficulty in the US East 1 region, at least. I'm not sure whether it's affecting the rest of the world yet, but I'm sure it will do, because there are many apps that are affected by this. I mean, Roblox, Ring, apparently, as well. Snapchat
Vodafone,
too. Yeah.
So many.
So a huge outage at the moment. No sign yet as to the cause of it. I mean, Fortnite is down, if anyone's gaming at the moment as well. According to Down Detector, there are 2,000 reports of the Amazon Web Services outage in just the US, as you say. I'm not sure yet whether it will be global, but I can imagine it probably will be.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that, but do head over to the Sky News app. It's got the very latest.
Very good morning to you. We start with some breaking news. A major internet outage is affecting dozens of websites, online games and apps. It includes Amazon, Snapchat and Vodafone. Issues started this morning. Problems appear to be related to an issue at Amazon Web Services. A number of banks as well, among those saying that their online services affected. Let's bring in Amelia Harper, who's following this for us. And Amelia, I'm just looking at some of the reports. It goes on and on. HMRC, Signal, Halifax, BT, EE, even Sky.
Yeah, numerous websites reporting issues. This is something that we started to hear about within the last hour, issues starting from approximately around or just before 8:30, and we understand that there is a growing internet outage across various websites, games and apps. And we started to hear about this through the website Down Detector, and this is where you and I, Gareth, could report an issue or a website not working. Growing numbers of people are using that to start to report issues with websites. A number of websites, including Snapchat, Amazon and the government website, are having issues. At the moment, there are over 5,000 reports of Snapchat not working, over 1,500 reports of outages on the Amazon website, and there are 99 reports at the moment, that may climb, of gov.uk not working. And as you mentioned, some banking users at some banks are having issues as well. Some users at Lloyds Bank, Halifax and Bank of Scotland are reporting issues accessing their accounts. There also are issues with HMRC. For me, when I went to have a look on various websites, for me, some of them were working. So Amazon was working, gov.uk was working, the tracking app Life360 for me was working, Ancestry.com, I had a look at their website, that was working. But Zoom, MyFitnessPal and the ticket site Eventbrite were not. So there are questions about the full extent of this, and some websites potentially seem to be working for some, and some, for others they aren't. And as you mentioned, Gareth, the cause has been identified as retail giant Amazon's cloud computing service called Amazon Web Services. And it might sound a little bit complicated, but we can break it down a little bit. So AWS provides on-demand cloud computing services over the internet. So what this means in real time is that companies can rent IT resources like servers, storage or databases instead of actually buying and maintaining their own physical hardware. And it's thought that millions of businesses actually use AWS. So as you can expect, the impact is pretty widespread. And we've had some information from Amazon Web Services. They have said they are reporting increased error rates and latencies, i.e. delays. They've issued a statement on their website confirming increased error rates and latencies for multiple services. It says we're actively engaged and working to both mitigate the issue and understand the root cause. We'll provide an update in 45 minutes. We should be expecting that around about now. But as I said, widespread across numerous sites, Gareth. Gareth. It's not totally clear for some of the websites that I use seem to be working, some of them don't, but issues continuing to be reported.
Just looking, actually, Amelia, AWS, some Reuters reporting, AWS issue appears to be related to the DNS resolution of the Dynamob API endpoint in US East 1. If you can decode that, good on you, but that seems to be the issue at the moment. They've identified a potential root cause for the error rates that websites are identifying. And if you go on to some of the documentation on AWS's very complicated guide for its users, service users, there are numerous different regions that provide this connectivity service for online websites. And this West 1 is based in the US West, California, and then the East 1, which is the one they've just been referring to, appears to be based in North Virginia. And there's several HTTP servers and protocols linked to that. Just looking, Amelia, at some of the websites you've been mentioning, I'm having more success with Zoom. That seems to be working for me. HMRC working for me. Bank of Scotland working for me. Slack issues with at the moment. BT issues with. And looking at Down Detector, which, like you say, Amelia, lots of people kind of log their issues with websites. It appears as though the instance of reporting is starting just to slide away ever so slightly. You look at the peaks for companies such as Ring, AWS, Amazon, Zoom. They do seem to be falling ever so slightly. So perhaps a sense that AWS has identified the issue and potentially working to resolve it pretty swiftly.
Yeah, well, that's the hope, Gareth, is with anything of this magnitude in terms of the numbers of users affected, they would hope to resolve this as quickly as possible. But you mentioned some of those sites there, for example, Ring Doorbell. We have on our website some users saying they can't see outside their house. Definitely scary. Data shows the spikes happened at about 8 o'clock. But as I said earlier, there were some banking users as well. Coinbase, which is the world's biggest Bitcoin custodian and the largest US-based cryptocurrency exchange, has said to customers all funds are safe during this morning's outages. Our team is working on the issue and will provide updates here. So, they will be looking to try to resolve this as quickly as possible. Elon Musk has actually shared an update on his site X. He has just said X works, Gareth.
Always keen to make some mileage, I'm sure. I can also confirm I cannot see my front doorbell, but I can tell our viewers here on Sky that the Sky website is back up and running. There's full connectivity to that. So we're good to go. We're still with you here on Sky News. And Amelia, for the moment, thank you so much. We will, of course, keep you up to date on any of those developments as they happen. We'll bring you plenty more on the website and app too. Hello, time to return to our top story. A major internet outage affecting dozens of websites, online games and apps. That is included over the course of the past hour or so Amazon, Snapchat, Vodafone. Issues started this morning. Problems appear to be related to an issue at Amazon Web Services. Banks have also been affected. Just hearing, though, as we bring in our correspondent, Amelia Harper, just hearing, Amelia, that according to Amazon Web Services, they are seeing, and I quote, significant signs of recovery. Yeah,
in the last few moments, we had a statement from Amazon Web Services saying its engineers have applied what they're calling initial mitigations. We're observing early signs of recovery for some affected services, but we now understand that there are significant signs of recovery, meaning that the end for this outage appears to be in sight. But if we take a step back and actually understand where this started, a little bit earlier today, starting at around 8:30 a.m, there was relatively widespread internet outage affecting a number of websites, games and apps. And we started to hear about this on the website Down Detector, which is where you and I could report issues with websites saying that they might not be working. A number of websites, including Snapchat, Amazon and the government website gov.uk were affected. I had a look earlier, and at one point there were over 5,000 reports of Snapchat not working, over 1,500 reports of outages on the Amazon website. Some banking users on some banks were also experiencing some problems. So users at Lloyds Bank, Halifax and Bank of Scotland reporting issues accessing their accounts, and some also reported issues accessing HMRC. When I had a look on some of the apps and websites that I use, some of them were working and some of them weren't. So, for example, Amazon was working, the government website was working, the tracking app Life360 and Ancestry.com were all working, but Zoom, MyFitnessPal and Eventbrite, the ticketing site, were not working. Now, this is where it gets a little bit complicated, but we'll keep it simple. So the cause has been identified as retail giant Amazon's cloud computing service called Amazon Web Services. And what AWS does is it provides on-demand cloud computing services over the internet. So in real terms, what this means is that companies can rent storage and resourcing and databases instead of actually buying and maintaining their own physical hardware. And many companies use AWS. And so, as you can imagine, when this impacts one, it will start to impact lots of others. The Amazon Web Services earlier said they reported increased error rates and latencies. They had, in a statement a little bit earlier, now of course saying that there is signs of significant recovery, but they'd said they'd identified a potential root cause. And what they had said is that it appears the issue is related to the process that allows companies to connect with their servers. So we had a statement from them that said, based on our investigation, the issue appears to be related to DNS resolution, bear with me, of the Dynamo DB API endpoint in US East 1. Now, DNS resolution is that process that allows companies to connect with their servers, and the US East 1 relates to services hosted in Virginia in the US. They had said earlier they were working on accelerating a path to recovery, but we've had that statement really in the last few moments saying that there is significant signs of recovery. But Gareth, lots and lots of companies have been affected by this.
Amelia, really good to have you with us, joining us from our Westminster studio. Thank you. Let's also bring in tech journalist Chris Stockwell-Walker. Chris, good to have you with us. So, Amelia, they're kind of pointing to some of the issues. What's your understanding of what went wrong?
Yeah, if I just build a little bit, Gareth, on what Amelia was saying there, because it is obviously very technical language and it can be quite difficult to understand. So this DNS system is effectively the system that translates skynews.com into a series of numbers called your Internet Protocol or IP address. The IP address is the way that the web works effectively, knowing where to route you on the whole of the internet in order to serve you your website. So the issue that we've identified with Amazon saying that they've had problems with this DNS resolution is effectively an inability to translate those basic terms of the words into the numbers that get you to an actual website. And that might seem like it's not a huge issue, but that is a problem because obviously that results in people not being able to log on to websites. So that, Gareth, solves the US problem. But then many of our viewers might be thinking, well, why is this affecting me in the UK? And there are a couple of reasons why that might be based on what Amazon is saying here about its AWS outage. So one is that, frankly, lots of apps and services nowadays are global. So while you may be logging on to a website or an app or a service from the UK, there might be a component of that app which is based in the United States, which relies on that AWS US East server that Amelia was talking about just before. But if I just kind of briefly say, there is one other potential problem that we might have here, which is Amazon did put a big list of these issues that they had and the services internally within Amazon that were being affected. And one of those was called the AWS Global Accelerator. Now, that is basically a little tool within Amazon that will serve you a product or a service or a web page closer to where you are based as a user rather than in the United States. So think of it a little bit like the sort of Amazon equivalent of, or the web equivalent of air traffic control. If you can't actually access that system, then there is not a route that a data packet can take in order to actually serve you there. So that perhaps is why we're seeing this outage.
What apps, what do websites do here, Chris? Because, you know, it's Amazon, it's a juggernaut. It probably, I don't know what their pricing structure is, but it's probably very competitive because it's so big. So you probably go and do your business with them. But what about building in resilience and building in kind of fallover capacity so that, you know, if something like this happens at Amazon, well, we can switch servers or we can switch to a different routing. Is that possible? Do banks, building societies, companies do that? Can they do that?
They can do that. They can absolutely have multiple clients and multiple contracts with different providers. There are many out there. Amazon happens to be one of the biggest. It has around about a 1/3 share of the cloud server market. And so there are other big competitors, including the likes of Google and others that you can use as well. Although obviously you then have to think about, well, am I spending money for a redundancy that often doesn't happen that often? And that's the reality. You know, these things come about maybe every couple of years. The last major outage that we saw of AWS was in 2023. Then before that, it was a couple of years before 2021. We did see one in 2020 that impacted us as well. But truthfully, you know, these things are often perfectly running and absolutely fine. They have, you know, 99.99999% uptime. So the unfortunate thing is when this does happen infrequently, because these individual companies are so large and have such a big share of the market, it does have this cascading impact where one system goes down, then another, and then suddenly half the internet is gone.
And this always poses the question about kind of IT security as well. I actually was outside of London over the weekend, and there was a data center there. The security, the physical security around it made it look like a nuclear weapons storage facility. It just was remarkable. And this I guess, will pose some questions. We don't believe that's any of the case of any hack or anything with this AWS situation. But it will kind of pose those questions again about IT security and resilience and national security and all the things that come with the internet, right?
Yeah, of course. And this is one of the things we rely increasingly on the internet to transact every part of our lives, not just digitally, but actually increasingly offline. So we saw, for instance, a couple of years back with the big CrowdStrike impact around about 18 months ago, you know, payment servers, tills going offline in shops because of this problem. And obviously many banking systems are facing issues with the AWS outage here. You know, as you say, Gareth, nothing to suggest at all that this is a kind of deliberate act or a security issue. I think, as often is the case here, it will be something very, very benign. It will be either someone with fat fingers typing the wrong thing and pushing out an update, or perhaps just one little small system, the cog in the hardware going haywire, and then that cascades down. But yeah, it does kind of pose these questions, I suppose, of why do we rely quite so much on these handful of companies for huge swathes of our lives, both digital and also offline?
Chris, really good to have you with us. Thank you for putting it into some simple English for Luddites like me. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Let's return to our top story. A major internet outage this morning affected dozens of websites, online games and apps. That included Amazon, Snapchat and Vodafone. Problems appear to have been related to an issue at Amazon Web Services. Some providers, though, such as OpenAI, say systems are operating normally once more, and the government says it's in contact with Amazon Web Services over the issue. A number of banks included in those being affected earlier. Well, we spoke to the technology journalist Chris Stokell-Walker, who told us more about the cause of the outage.
This DNS system is effectively the system that translates skynews.com into a series of numbers called your Internet Protocol, or IP address. The IP address is the way that the web works effectively, knowing where to route you on the whole of the internet in order to serve you your website. So the issue that we've identified with Amazon saying that they've had problems with this DNS resolution is effectively an inability to translate those basic terms of the words into the numbers that get you to an actual website. And that might seem like it's not a huge issue, but that is a problem because obviously that results in people not being able to log on to websites. So that, Gareth, solves the US problem. But then many of our viewers might be thinking, well, why is this affecting me in the UK? And there are a couple of reasons why that might be based on what Amazon is saying here about its AWS outage. So one is that, frankly, lots of apps and services nowadays are global. So while you may be logging on to a website or an app or a service from the UK, there might be a component of that app which is based in the United States, which relies on that AWS US East server that Amelia was talking about just before. But if I just kind of briefly say there is one other potential problem that we might have here, which is Amazon did put a big list of these issues that they had and the services internally within Amazon that were being affected. And one of those was called the AWS Global Accelerator. Now, that is basically a little tool within Amazon that will serve you a product or a service or a web page closer to where you are based as a user rather than in the United States. So think of it a little bit like the sort of Amazon equivalent of, or the web equivalent of air traffic control. If you can't actually access that system, then there is not a route that a data packet can take in order to actually serve you there. So that perhaps is why we're seeing this outage.
What do apps, what do websites do here, Chris? Because, you know, it's Amazon, it's a juggernaut. Probably, I don't know what their pricing structure is, but it's probably very competitive because it's so big. So you probably go and do your business with them. But what about building in resilience and building in kind of fallover capacity so that, you know, if something like this happens at Amazon, well, we can switch servers or we can switch to a different routing. Is that possible? Do banks, building societies, companies do that? Can they do that?
They can do that. They can absolutely have multiple clients and multiple contracts with different providers. There are many out there. Amazon happens to be one of the biggest. It has around about a 1/3 share of the cloud server market. And so there are other big competitors, including the likes of Google and others that you can use as well. Although obviously you then have to think about, well, am I spending money for a redundancy that often doesn't happen that often? And that's the reality. You know, these things come about maybe every couple of years. The last major outage that we saw of AWS was in 2023. Then before that, it was a couple of years before 2021. We did see one in 2020 that impacted us as well. But truthfully, you know, these things are often perfectly running and absolutely fine. They have, you know, 99.99999% uptime. So the unfortunate thing is when this does happen infrequently, because these individual companies are so large and have such a big share of the market, it does have this cascading impact where one system goes down, then another, and then suddenly half the internet is gone.
And this always poses the question about kind of IT security as well. I actually was outside of London over the weekend, and there was a data centre there. The security, the physical security around it made it look like a nuclear weapons storage facility. It just was remarkable. And this I guess, will pose some questions. We don't believe that's any of the case of any hack or anything with this AWS situation. But it will kind of pose those questions again about IT security and resilience and national security and all the things that come with the internet, right?
Yeah, of course. And this is one of the things we rely increasingly on the internet to transact every part of our lives, not just digitally, but actually increasingly offline. So we saw, for instance, a couple of years back with the big CrowdStrike impact around about 18 months ago, you know, payment servers, tills going offline in shops because of this problem. And obviously many banking systems are facing issues with the AWS outage here. You know, as you say, Gareth, nothing to suggest at all that this is a kind of deliberate act or a security issue. I think, as often is the case here, it will be something very, very benign. It will be either someone with fat fingers typing the wrong thing and pushing out an update, or perhaps just one little small system, the cog in the hardware going haywire, and then that cascades down. But yeah, it does kind of pose these questions, I suppose, of why do we rely quite so much on these handful of companies for huge swathes of our lives, both digital and also offline?
Just hearing from AWS that they say the underlying issues being fully mitigated and most services succeeding normally now, and that there may be just a little restriction in the speed of those services whilst they work towards a full resolution to that. Any further developments will bring them to you. Very good afternoon to you. We begin with a developing story through the course of the morning. A major internet outage is affecting dozens of websites, online games and apps, including Amazon, Snapchat and Vodafone. The issue started this morning. Problems appear to be related to an issue at Amazon Web Services. They say their services have now mostly recovered, and we understand a number of banks have been among those affected. Well, in the last hour, the government released this statement saying we're aware of an incident affecting Amazon Web Services and several online services which rely on their infrastructure. Through our established incident response arrangements, we are in contact with the company, who are working to restore services as quickly as possible. Let's get the latest on this with Amelia Harper, who's been following the story, and just bring us up to speed, if you will.
Well, we earlier had a widespread internet outage affecting websites, games and apps. We are now being told that the underlying problem is now being fixed, or has now been fixed, and we should be seeing those sites starting to return to normal now. This all started when people began reporting issues on the website Down Detector, which is a website where you and I can list or report issues with a website or an app not working, and thousands of people had taken to the website to say that apps like Snapchat or Amazon or even the government's website was not working. This started at roughly 8:30 a.m. We can see the little spike on the images in the screen there. At one point we had over 5,000 reports of Snapchat not working. At one point we had over 1,500 reports of outages on the Amazon website. We also had reports about the government website not working. We also had, on top of this, some people reporting issues with banking platforms. Some users at Lloyds Bank, Halifax and Bank of Scotland reported issues accessing their accounts, also issues with HMRC. It's clear that some websites for some were working and some weren't, that are listed, as we can see on the screen there. So I had a look at some of them earlier. Amazon for me was working, the government website was working, Life360, the tracking app was working, Ancestry.com was fine, but what wasn't fine for me was Zoom, MyFitnessPal and ticket site Eventbrite. And we now know that the cause of this is Amazon Web Services. This is Amazon's cloud computing service. And AWS provides cloud computing services on the internet. And what this means in sort of layman's terms is that companies can rent storage or databases instead of having to manage, build and run their own physical infrastructure or hardware. This AWS system underpins millions of large companies, and so when you get an issue with it, you're going to see multiple companies having problems, as we did today. And as I said, we now are told that this issue has primarily been fixed, but there is a backlog that we might see some services still having some issues, but they had identified this root potential cause. The issue related to what they're calling the process that allows companies to connect with their servers. And just to keep this simple, as some of the tech might get a little bit complicated, but they put out a statement earlier, AWS, saying, based on our investigation, the issue appears to be related to DNS resolution of the DynamoDB API endpoint in US East 1. DNS resolution is the process that allows companies to connect with their servers. And then the US East 1 region relates to services hosted by a data center in Virginia in the United States. And we can hear a little bit more now from technology journalist Chris Stokel-Walker, who can explain a little bit more about this exact DNS system.
This DNS system is effectively the system that translates skynews.com into a series of numbers called your Internet Protocol, or IP address. The IP address is the way that the web works effectively, knowing where to route you on the whole of the internet in order to serve you your website. So the issue that we've identified with Amazon saying that they've had problems with this DNS resolution is effectively an inability to translate those basic terms of the words into the numbers that get you to an actual website. And that might seem like it's not a huge issue, but that is a problem, because obviously that results in people not being able to log on to websites.
Well, Amazon Web Services has been working hard with its engineers to try to fix this problem. It's taken a number of hours, but they say that that underlying issue is now sorted. There might be a little bit of a backlog, but it looks like the end is in sight in terms of this outage.
Really appreciate you joining us. Good to have you with us. Plenty more on that story on the Sky News website and app. Further developments to come. Thank you. Let's talk about the US President. J.D. Vance expected to fly to Israel tomorrow to help shore up the Gaza peace deal, which has been tested by both sides in the days since being signed. Just this morning, though, Israel's military says it fired towards two groups of militants that it says crossed the withdrawal line in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, while over the weekend, 2 IDF soldiers and 45 Palestinians were killed. Let's bring in Sally Lockwood, who's in Jerusalem. And Sally, J.D. Vance arriving in Israel tomorrow. He's hot on the heels of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as well. A real push by the US to try and keep this ceasefire together.
Yeah, that's right. It's just a week since Donald Trump's celebratory visit here to Israel to announce this ceasefire and the return of the living hostages. And we're now seeing these high-level American diplomats returning to Israel under a very different, in a very different tone, a very different mood, because that ceasefire that's been in place for around 10 days now is hanging by a thread. This morning, we've heard reports from the Israeli military that they have fired on what they describe as two groups of terrorists in northern Gaza. But we're also now hearing and seeing reports of a plume of smoke over Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. The Israeli military haven't yet commented on that incident, but it does suggest there's been an airstrike of some description in the south of Gaza today as well. And of course, that exchange of fire that we saw yesterday, 2 Israeli soldiers, we were told by the Israeli military, were killed in an exchange of fire with Hamas fighters in the south of the Gaza Strip, which resulted in airstrikes throughout the entire territory yesterday. And for a time, it really did feel like the entire ceasefire efforts were going to collapse. As it seems, the US diplomatic efforts are continuing. Israel halted humanitarian aid going into Gaza yesterday following that exchange of fire with Hamas. We've been told that due to American pressure, that will resume today. That said, aid trucks are currently queuing on the Israeli side of the Karim Shalom border crossing, trying to get into Gaza, and they haven't yet been allowed in. Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, and his envoy, Steve Witkoff, they've both arrived in Israel today, and I've been told by an American diplomatic source that their focus is very much on what is going on in Gaza, that this was a last-minute decision to come here together. And this American source said to me that their message to both sides is going to be quite simply, and I quote, "Get your beep together. Do not let this ceasefire fall apart." Now, J.D. Vance arriving tomorrow. That visit by the US Vice President has been rumoured for a couple of days now, and the intent of that visit was to iron out all the details which are still to be decided over what's going to happen next in terms of the demilitarisation of Hamas and what and who will govern Gaza in the next phase of the ceasefire. Well, it seems the focus now is very much on trying to hold this ceasefire together, because it really does feel like it's hanging by a thread, and any strike, any shot could really ignite full-scale fighting once again. That's the big concern today.
Joining us live from Jerusalem, Sally Lockwood there for us. Thank you so much. Just seeing a brief line on X. This is from Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who responding to Donald Trump and his claims that the US has destroyed Iran's nuclear industry. The line from the Ayatollah there is to keep dreaming, in reference to Donald Trump there. Obviously, there was those strikes by both the United States and Israel earlier in the year. Well, the Ayatollah reiterating those remarks that, of course, the Iranians have put out before, but it'd be interesting to see how the president responds to that when he wakes a little later in Washington, DC. We'll keep you up to speed on that one as it happens. 12:10. Let's talk about the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, telling Sky News the royal family has taken the right course of action over Prince Andrew's titles. Prince Andrew surrendered those titles and honours following a series of revelations he said were distracting from the work of the royal family. He's always strongly denied any wrongdoing. It's been reported, though, that Andrew asked his bodyguard, who worked for the Metropolitan Police, to dig up information about his teenage accuser, Virginia Giuffre. Earlier on Sky News, Bridget Phillipson told us it was up to backbench MPs to spark any debates around Prince Andrew in Parliament.
We agree and support the decision that the royal family and Prince Andrew have taken and the recent announcement that they've made. I don't think the royal family would want to detract from wider parliamentary business that's currently ongoing.
Parliamentarians have a
Of course,
right to do
Parliament always has. There are always routes for parliamentarians to put forward debates, to find time for debates, if that's what backbench MPs would wish to do. But I think we've seen the right course of action in terms of what the royal family have done so far. But the title of Prince is a title that's held by virtue of being the son of a monarch.
Straight to Westminster, and Amanda Akers, who's standing by for us. And Amanda, some pretty kind of vocal views there from Bridget Phillips, and especially that line about backbench MPs.
I think it's really interesting. Yesterday we spoke to Ed Miliband, her colleague in Cabinet, who effectively just said, well, the government would just follow the royal family on this, and seemed to be suggesting, well, if the King decided that it would be helpful for Parliament to pass legislation to officially strip the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, of his titles, then they would be following their lead. Whereas I think what Bridget Phillipson was really doing there was almost seeming to suggest to backbench MPs that this was going to be an option for them to look at, and certainly quite outspoken in terms of her support for the decision for Prince Andrew to lose his Duke of York title, saying it was definitely the right course of action, and also speaking up about the importance of sending a message to those who have been the victims of sexual abuse in the past. Now, of course, Prince Andrew denies all the allegations against him, but considering the revelations that have been coming out of the emails in connection with Jeffrey Epstein in recent days and weeks, now the publication this week of Virginia Giuffre's autobiography in the coming days, there's clearly concern about the additional focus on this story and the additional lines coming out of it, that there are many MPs who are exceedingly concerned and who would like to see the government passing laws to formally strip the Duke of York for his title from him, because although he's given up that title, the Duke of York, he still technically has the dukedom, and it's only through an act of Parliament that that could be taken away from him. Now, Rachel Maskell, who is the MP for York, she's actually sitting without the whip at the moment after rebelling over the welfare reforms, but elected as a Labour MP. She previously tried to bring a bill to Parliament which would give Parliament the power to strip peers of their titles. That didn't succeed at the time, but she's saying she wants the government to look at that again. And that legislation is actually based on a 1917 law that was introduced in order to strip the titles of peers who had fought against the UK in the First World War, fighting for Germany, which is quite interesting, though others have suggested that there are other ways that this could perhaps be done more simply going forward. But it's interesting that it's been sort of supported by the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, who both sort of supported the government line in saying that it's not something that they would push for, but if it came to Parliament, it's something that they would be willing to discuss. Let's hear from Nick Timothy, who is from the Conservatives, speaking to us this morning.
Seems that the royal family have acted quite decisively this weekend, which I'm pleased to see. And if something is brought before Parliament to debate the titles, then obviously that is what we should do.
Now, it's something that the SNP, perhaps unsurprisingly, are also calling for, with Stephen Flynn making the point that giving Parliament this power would also mean they could strip the peerage from Lord Mandelson as well. And one other final interesting point in relation to Parliament and the royal family is that MPs don't actually, they're barred by the rules of Parliament from really talking about the royal family in any way that could kind of cast any negative aspersions to them. So they can talk about their finances, but there are actually quite strict rules in place about what MPs are even able to discuss about the royals, and that's something that one Labour peer, George Fuchs, has actually written to the government about, saying that's also something that he'd like to see looked at. And I think, given all the renewed focus on Prince Andrew in recent days, that the pressure is going to continue to grow on the government on this, as well, of course, the royal family.
Amanda, live in Westminster, good to have you with us. Thank you. Let's turn our attention to a story you probably have seen on social media this morning, certainly online. That hunt continuing for a gang who carried out a daylight heist or a brazen robbery on one of the world's most famous museums. 8 of France's priceless crown jewels taken from the Louvre in Paris in just 4 minutes. The museum continues to be closed today. Investigations still underway. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins picks up the story from Paris.
Brazen and in broad daylight, the thief in a hood and high-vis, part of a team carrying out an audacious heist at the Louvre. The robber is breaking into cabinets containing priceless jewels, in video broadcast by our partners, BFM TV. In a matter of minutes, treasures worth an incalculable amount had been swiped from one of the most famous museums in the world as confused visitors were ushered out by frantic security.
Then we walked out of the room of the Mona Lisa. We went to the left in the direction of the French crown jewels. And there were security people, and they shouted to us, you have to move this place. You have to be quick, fast, run.
This is how the thieves got in. Shortly after the museum opened, they used a motorised ladder to get to the first floor, where they cut the glass and headed for the Apollo Gallery. A display housing treasures from Napoleon and French sovereigns. They smashed cabinets and gathered their swag before fleeing on scooters.
It must be said that these are professionals. Organised crime today targets art objects. And museums have obviously become targets because France, as you know, is a country with a rich heritage, a country with historical heritage objects of great value. And so these museums have also become targets for these criminals.
And this is what they made off with. 8 items, including a tiara, necklace and earrings belonging to a queen, and an empress's emerald earrings and necklace. But this tiara, owned by Empress Eugenie, was found dropped outside.
I think it's the theft of the decade, you know, targeting the Louvre, the world's most famous museum, and stealing the crown jewels from Napoleon. It's like the movies, you know. We have seen similar heists, but targeting the Louvre is next level. And it's a big scandal now in France, of course, losing the crown jewels. It's a big thing.
The French president has called the raid an attack on our heritage as forensic teams worked to track down the masterminds.
You have to see it to believe it. A heist straight out of a Hollywood script on this busy tourist street. Just how did they get away with it?
A European manhunt is underway, but French authorities know time is against them. The gang could be trying to cross the border or melting down their loot as we speak.
Well, let's get more with Siobhan, who spoke to us live from Paris a little earlier.
We thought that the Louvre would be open today, apart from the area that had been affected by the robbery, but that seems to have changed. You can see there are still people milling around because they've got the word now that the Louvre will remain closed for today. And that is as investigations continue and a Europe-wide manhunt has been launched to try and find the gang behind this robbery. But so many people across France are absolutely stunned and outraged by what has happened here. The Justice Minister spoke to French media today and said that this has had a negative impact on France's reputation because, of course, they have so many museums carrying so many high-value artefacts. So I guess the big question is, what happens now? The last that we were told by the authorities is that this gang got away on scooters or motorbikes heading towards the A6 motorway. Who could have done this? Well, the prosecutor has spoken to French media and suggested 2 possibilities. Either organised criminals who are using this to fund further criminal activity, or a gang who are stealing these items to order. But an art detective has told Sky News the French authorities are really up against it. He reckons they had about a week to try and track this gang down before the jewels were either moved on or melted down.
We're also going to hear live from a former director of security at the V&A in about 10 minutes' time. Plenty more on that story to come. We'll follow the developments of that manhunt as they happen, more online as well. Some of the day's other stories for you include this.
But I'm afraid you're just going to have to suck it up, OK? Because I am the democratically elected leader.
Reform UK suspending 4 of its councillors in Kent after that clip was leaked to The Guardian. The video shows members arguing over financial decisions during a meeting. Party spokesperson says that Paul Thomas, Oliver Bradshaw, Bill Barrett and Maxine Fothergill have had the whip suspended pending investigation following evidence that they brought the party into disrepute. A new post-GCSE qualification to be offered to pupils between the ages of 16 and 19 in England. V-levels will cover subjects like engineering and agriculture, replacing the current 900 vocational qualifications that are available. Government says it's a major overhaul of the education system.
Smaller programmes of study that can be done in combination with A-levels that make sure that young people who want to consider vocational routes are able to do that alongside academic study. And this is about bringing the system together much more coherently, so it's clearer for young people that we tackle the problems we see at the moment around young people who are not in education, employment or training.
A group of bereaved families have written to the Prime Minister calling for an inquiry into websites that promote suicide. They say there have been multiple missed opportunities to shut down online forums that encourage people to take their own lives. Troops will soon be allowed to shoot down drones that threaten military bases. In a speech later, the Defence Secretary John Healey will say the UK is stepping up defences in the face of new threats. It comes after several European countries saw their airspace violated in recent weeks. 2 people have died after a cargo plane skidded off a runway in Hong Kong and fell into the sea. Authorities said the Boeing 747 arrived from Dubai, crashed through the airport fencing as it landed. 4 crew members were rescued. The Kremlin's saying that work is underway for a major summit between President Trump and President Putin in Budapest. It comes after reports that Trump and Zelensky, though, had a tense exchange at the White House on Friday. According to the Financial Times, the US president told the Ukrainian leader to give up the entire Donbass or risk being destroyed by Russia. Donald Trump was asked about that on Air Force One.
We think that what they should do is just stop at the lines where they are, the battle lines. You have a battle line right now. The rest is very tough to negotiate. If you're going to say, you take this, we take that, there's so many different permutations. So what I say is they should stop right now at the battle lines. Go home, stop killing people, and be done.
What do you think should happen with the Donbass region then?
Let it be cut the way it is. It's cut up right now. I think 78% of the land is already taken by Russia. You leave it the way it is right now. They can negotiate something later on down the line. But I said, cut and stop at the battle line, go home, stop fighting, stop killing people.
Well, that was the President on Air Force One, and this is the Defence and Security Military analyst Simon Diggins with more.
I think part of the difficulty of doing President Trump is this kind of volatile switching from one thing to the other, and he listens to the last person. I don't think he really appreciates why Ukraine is so determined not to do a land swap, particularly for the rest of the Donbass. I think President Trump looks at it and goes, well, it's only 25% and you get peace. What he ignores or has not been made clear to him is that remaining 25% is the key defensive area that Ukraine has set up. So what President Putin is to say, look, it's only a few extra 1,000 acres, whatever, what does it matter? Actually, it matters enormously because it's Ukraine's overall security. If Ukraine gave up those against what looked like a pleasing prize, a peace, then it's very easy then for President Putin 5-10 years down the line to do what he did with Crimea and start all over again. I think because he deals in very big concepts. So he deals in this idea of peace. We saw that with Gaza. Why are these people fighting? This is a stupid war. Why are people fighting? I think he's got exactly the same thing with Ukraine and with Russia. He cannot see the point in it. He's a property man. So you sell one bit of property, you buy another bit of property, you swap and you change over, and you get a bigger prize, which in his view is peace, and then everything works from there. So he then struggles with the level of detail that's required, that kind of first or second order detail. Putin, on the other hand, is a master of detail. And we heard a report not just from this most recent phone call, but from the first meeting that Putin and Trump had in Alaska recently. President Trump benefited from a 1.5-hour lecture on history from Putin. I think it really irritated President Trump. But that's just the level of detail that President Putin's got this there. And I think it leaves President Trump sort of flailing, going, how on earth do I respond to that? So he doesn't respond. And so when President Putin then gets him on the phone, as he did last Thursday, and again gives him a 2.5-hour lecture on the wickedness of Ukraine and why this is a perfect reasonable thing to do, I think President Trump is influenced by that. Where even the most basic thing could be a ceasefire, even a ceasefire on the current defensive lines that both Russia and Ukraine have got. That's something that at least stops the killing. If it stops the killing, then there's a possibility of a talk beyond that. That itself would be a prize, and I think we shouldn't underestimate. It doesn't deal with the underlying structural issues. It doesn't deal with the kind of hurt and the pain and the horror of the invasion that Russia inflicted on Ukraine. But we might be able to get a ceasefire out of that. And of course, it's very interesting. It's actually taking place in Hungary, because your report about the oil and the gas. Hungary is one of the major recipients of that oil and gas coming from Russia. So it's clearly in their interests to bring about a peace, because otherwise they'll be looking around the world wondering where they're going to get their fuel from.
That was Simon Diggins there. Plenty more on the Sky's website and app. Coming up in a couple of minutes after the break, we're going to talk about the families who say they feel gaslit, dismissed and blamed for what went wrong at one of Leeds' hospitals. They've been left bereaved. We're going to bring you more details on that after the break.
People want intelligent news, but it can be done in a less buttoned-up way.
Have a conversation in the same way that people do at home. Sophie is the best in the business.
If politicians are not answering the question, I'm not going to let them get away with that. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous. And there is nobody better to cut through the noise than Wilf.
You did say there wouldn't be further tax hikes. You can no longer make that promise. Mornings with Ridge and Frost. I literally can't wait to get going.
Play it cool, Wilf. Play it cool.
Now then, grieving families have welcomed the launch of an independent investigation into maternity and neonatal services at an NHS trust. The parents of the babies at Leeds teaching hospitals say that they felt gaslit, dismissed and blamed for what went wrong. The details come from our North of England correspondent, Katerina Fatozzi.
They are parents who say warnings were missed, voices ignored, and as a result, the lives of their children lost.
This shouldn't have happened. Well, they tell us it shouldn't have happened, but there's nothing about what's being done to make sure it doesn't happen again.
All these families used Leeds Teaching Hospital's maternity services. Their babies were stillborn or died shortly after birth. Amarjeet Mataru was left in a coma. Internal reviews found different care may have meant their children could still be alive. For Fiona and Dan, a coroner ruled their little girl, Aliona, died as a result of neglect from medical staff.
After our daughter died, we were told that they'd never seen anything like it before, and we believed it initially. We believed that we were the first people, the only people that this had ever happened to. And in the depths of our despair and grief, we needed to find other people that understood us, that were the same as us.
Now, after years of campaigning, bereaved families in Leeds, of which dozens have been identified, have finally got what they've been demanding, a fully independent inquiry into Leeds' maternity services.
It's been a long time coming. We have, as a group of families, spent years trying to essentially expose what the problems have been at Leeds that we've known have existed all along.
We shouldn't, as bereaved, grieving parents, had to do this for so many years, and he's now taking that responsibility, which is quite a relief to know that, you know, we don't have to keep fighting.
The Health Secretary's announcement of the independent investigation into the maternity services here comes not only after that relentless campaigning by bereaved families, but also after a series of damning reports with inspectors finding that the care here left pregnant people and babies at significant risk.
And today, the head of the trust said sorry.
I want to start by offering the families an unreserved apology, not only for their experience, but also for the fight that they've had in raising these concerns. And I want to assure them of our commitment to engage with the independent inquiry openly, honestly and transparently.
Leeds now joins a growing list. Morecambe Bay, Shrewsbury, East Kent and the ongoing Nottingham inquiry all uncovering shocking failures in maternity care across England. Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News, Leeds.
Coming up on Sky News after the break, we're going to talk about one famous museum, 4 minutes and 8 priceless jewels. The details after this short break. The hunt continues in France for a gang who carried out a daylight heist and brazen robbery in one of the world's most famous museums. 8 of France's priceless crown jewels taken from the Louvre in Paris in just 4 minutes. Museum remaining closed today as investigations continue. Let's discuss this further with former Director of Security at the Victoria and Albert, Vernon Rapley, who joins us now. Good to have you with us. Before we kind of get on to the heist in particular, or the robbery in particular. I'm interested in the balance of museums, because you have that challenge of displaying and making things accessible to the public, but at the same time keeping often priceless jewels protected and safe. It must be a hell of a balance to try and find.
Well, of course it is, and that's why museums exist. They're there not to lock things away. They're there for them to be used and to be made accessible. And so this does cause a conflict with security. The simple fact that objects are put in glass cases, of course, if you were really securing something in a bank vault, that's not how you would store it. But in a museum, you want people to see them and enjoy them and benefit from them. And so there is this conflict there that does make it difficult to balance the needs of protecting objects for future generations against the experience that you want to give people and visitors on a day-to-day basis.
So, hypothetical situation, I've got some priceless jewels that I want to display in your museum. What do you go about as someone that's in charge of securing their security to try and do so?
Yeah, and every object that the museums have is valuable, and a proportionate security is absolutely essential. In the security where we use a layered technique, we try not to use any one form of defence. We try to use 6, 7 or 8 different layers of defence, working from outwards into the object. And so things like I've discussed a moment ago, cases and case alarms are the sort of last layer of defence. And then you're looking out to provide security in the form of security officers or docents or warders, and then looking at room security and building security and estate security as well. And the problem for museums, of course, is a lot of these layers are diminished because the museum is open. And so a museum that is in lockdown is considerably better protected in some occasions than it is when it's open, and some of those layers are no longer valid because we're allowing unvetted members of the public into our museums.
This case seems to be centred around 4 individuals that use that ladder, which we've seen in some of the pictures, to get up to that window, cut through the window, take the jewels, and then escape on mopeds. What's your kind of analysis of this raid? What do you think kind of went on? Who might be behind it? And where do we think these jewels will end up?
Well, I think, first of all, it's a very audacious raid to do this in daylight. I can understand why they've done it. There are advantages to criminals in operating at night when security is sometimes lower, but there's also advantages to them operating in the day, and sometimes the escape, for example, may be made easier, and certainly the method of posing as workmen is obviously made easier during the working day, even though they picked a Sunday. But it's really worrying to me that this is a very audacious raid that puts the public and museum staff at risk whilst the raid is being carried out. I think it's far too early to speculate on who may have committed this crime, but it does fall into a pattern of similar offences that have been happening through Europe. I think there would be little doubt that this is a very well organised criminal gang. I doubt very much that this is their first museum theft. And as far as the objects go, well, they've picked these objects, sadly, because they're diamonds, they're precious metals, and there is the possibility that they could be broken down and sold as smaller parts. That doesn't mean that they will be, and I certainly hope they won't, because, of course, the Louvre and the staff there will be desperate to get these objects back intact and undamaged. But for criminals, they'll be looking at their options to realise this asset. And so I think, sadly, that is a possibility that they may consider that in the future.
Do you see any changes in, I don't want to use the word, but trends when it comes to art theft such as this and kind of museum theft such as this? Are people moving more towards these kind of objects? Because, to your point, they can be broken down, whereas, a Rembrandt's a Rembrandt. If anyone sees it, they know it's that, right?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that are leading here. Yes, definitely we're seeing an increase in museums being targeted for valuable stones, gems and metals. And that isn't to say that there's no longer a risk to artworks, paintings and sculptures. But it does seem to be that the criminals are using this as their preferred option at the moment. And I think it's because it gives them more options as to how they can realise that asset. Paintings are quite limited in what you can do. You need either a very particular buyer for that painting, or in fact you're going to try and ransom it back to the museum. The stones gives you another option that you can break them down and you can sell them. You can do this with some art objects as well. But fundamentally, I think criminals utilise or find opportunities, and opportunities are created by vulnerability. And vulnerability, sadly, is being seen in museums at the moment. I'm not saying it's directly related to cuts, because certainly not. I wouldn't want to comment in the case of the Louvre, but museums are getting less funding, and security is maybe one of the areas that is not being funded to the same level. That's not to say that the security at the Louvre wasn't proportionate and adequate, but it is to say that criminals understand this at the moment, that maybe if they want to steal gems, it's easier to steal it from a public gallery or public museum than it would be from a bank or from a commercial jeweller, for example.
And just briefly, Vernon, one last thought. You know, these kind of thefts capture the attention because they're physical. You can see them. There's audacity behind them. What about kind of digital crime and fraud and all of those? Does that actually pose, if anything, a bigger threat now to museums such as these?
Well, it's certainly. I wouldn't say it's a bigger threat. I think the loss of these items is really horrific, and no museum wants to lose its objects, but at the same time losing its data and the information about those objects is also a huge problem, and something that all museums are very alert to and protected against. I think the other thing that the digital technology is exposing museums to weakness there is corruption of that for the purpose of facilitating physical theft as well. Everything is now reliant upon network security and cyber security. And again, whilst museums will invest very heavily in this, in everything with the best of their capabilities, there's limited finance and resources for government and nationally run museums to protect themselves at the very, very highest level that would be necessary to protect these objects.
Former Director of Security at the V&A, Vernon Rapley, good to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to take you to one of our other top stories today. A major internet outage has been affecting dozens of websites, online games and apps this morning. It included Amazon, Snapchat, Vodafone amongst them. The problem appears to have been related to an issue at Amazon Web Services. They say their services are now mostly recovered. Well, earlier I spoke to technology journalist Chris Stokell-Walker, who explained the cause of the outage.
This DNS system is effectively the system that translates skynews.com into a series of numbers called your Internet Protocol, or IP address. The IP address is the way that the web works effectively, knowing where to route you on the whole of the internet in order to serve you your website. So the issue that we've identified with Amazon saying that they've had problems with this DNS resolution is effectively an inability to translate those basic terms of the words into the numbers that get you to an actual website. And that might seem like it's not a huge issue, but that is a problem because obviously that results in people not being able to log on to websites. So that, Gareth, solves the US problem. But then many of our viewers might be thinking, well, why is this affecting me in the UK? And there are a couple of reasons why that might be based on what Amazon is saying here about its AWS outage. So one is that, frankly, lots of apps and services nowadays are global. So while you may be logging on to a website or an app or a service from the UK, there might be a component of that app which is based in the United States, which relies on that AWS US East server that Amelia was talking about just before. But if I just kind of briefly say, there is one other potential problem that we might have here, which is Amazon did put a big list of these issues that they had and the services internally within Amazon that were being affected. And one of those was called the AWS Global Accelerator. Now, that is basically a little tool within Amazon that will serve you a product or a service or a web page closer to where you are based as a user rather than in the United States. So think of it a little bit like the sort of Amazon equivalent of, or the web equivalent of air traffic control. If you can't actually access that system, then there is not a route that a data packet can take in order to actually serve you there. So that perhaps is why we're seeing this outage.
What do apps, what do websites do here, Chris? Because, you know, it's Amazon, it's a juggernaut. It probably, I don't know what their pricing structure is, but it's probably very competitive because it's so big. So you probably go and do your business with them. But what about building in resilience and building in kind of fallover capacity so that, you know, if something like this happens at Amazon, well, we can switch servers or we can switch to a different routing. Is that possible? Do banks, building societies, companies do that? Can they do that?
They can do that. They can absolutely have multiple clients and multiple contracts with different providers. There are many out there. Amazon.
Going to leave that there to bring you these live pictures of the King in Manchester, visiting the Heaton Park Hebrew Synagogue in Crumpsall on the 2nd of October. 35-year-old Jihad al-Shami drove his car at people outside the synagogue gathering for the holy day of Yom Kippur. He then attacked others with a knife, tried to storm that building as well, wearing a fake suicide belt. Well, armed police shot him dead and 2 members of the congregation were killed during that attack. And this is the King visiting the synagogue, visiting the scene there, those floral tributes that you can see him paying attention to. And I'm sure this will be a key moment for communities there to feel that they have the support, the attention, the guidance of the King as well, and see visits there. This is a scene that we have seen the royal family perform so many times, unfortunately, tragically, in situations and instances like this. But like I say, this is live pictures from Manchester, visiting the Heaton Park Hebrew Synagogue in Crumpsall. We'll bring you more of the developments of this visit, any comments made by the King as well and by those who meet with him. We'll bring them to you, of course. But like I say, this is following 18 days on since that attack outside the synagogue, people gathering for the holy day of Yom Kippur. That attack saw the car being driven in towards the building and people there, the knife attack that followed, an individual trying to storm the building wearing that fake suicide belt. 2 members of the congregation killed during that attack. That was 66-year-old Melvin Kravitz and 53-year-old Adrian Dolby. And the King, I'm sure, will be meeting with representatives of the community as he does so. And we're just seeing him there walking further into the grounds of the synagogue there. King Charles, adept at bringing the humanity to situations such as these, and I'm sure he'll do so. Like I say, on the 2nd of October, this attack took place, and we will bring you more details of the King's visit as it develops. Watch Skies today, still to come. In just 2 minutes, you can be brought all of the drama of a full soap opera. It's a new booming trend coming from China. It's all optimised for your smartphone. We're going to bring you the details after the break.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes. I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave, even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety, as Russian drones will be trying to find this position. We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming. I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood, hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment.
We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful. With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO.
This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force.
This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans.
The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
You're watching Sky News, just 10 to 1 on a Monday afternoon. Let's just show you some latest images now from Manchester, shall we? These are pictures in the last 5 or so minutes. As you can see there, the car arriving with the King just leaving the vehicle. He's in Manchester, King Charles visiting the Heaton Park Hebrew Synagogue in Crumpsall. And he's doing so as he meets representatives of the community and the congregation to mark the terrible tragedy that took place on the 2nd of October. That was when 35-year-old Jihad al-Shami drove his car at people outside that synagogue. People there at the time were gathering for the holy day of Yom Kippur. He went on to attack others with a knife and tried to storm the building wearing a fake suicide belt. Well, as you will have seen and remember, armed police officers shot Jihad al-Shami dead. 2 members of the congregation were killed during that attack. They were 66-year-old Melvin Kravitz and 53-year-old Adrian Dolby. And so the King, 18 days on, making this visit to the synagogue. And this is a role that the royal family tragically have played before, and the King will be adept at hearing the concerns, the experiences, the thoughts of the community, reflecting on those tragic circumstances and situations. And of course, this comes amid wider concerns across the UK about the security of synagogues and other places of worship, also of religious communities as well. There's been lots of talk and criticism of that decision in the end of last week to ban away supporters of a team from Tel Aviv from visiting to support their team when they play Aston Villa on the 6th of November next month. And lots of talk about ensuring the security and safety of Jewish communities. And this is something that the King will, I'm sure, hear firsthand from those who have witnessed and felt this so tragically firsthand earlier this month. And like I say, he's visiting the Heaton Park Hebrew Synagogue in Crumpsall. It's in Manchester, and you can see these latest images from about 5 minutes or so ago. The King, and there's his equerry there just passing by as well, taking in those floral tributes that remain, a brief wave to bystanders who are there to mark his appearance, and we'll bring you any more of the comments, any more of the reaction, and I'm sure we'll get more from the local community as well through the course of the afternoon. We'll bring it to you here live on Sky News as we see the King walking towards the entrance of the Heaton Park Hebrew Synagogue in Crumpsall. Full details to come here on Sky News. Now then, authorities in Birmingham are due to meet early this week to discuss, as I was just saying there, the ban on Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending an away match in Aston Villa next month. The Education Secretary has told Sky News nobody should be barred from attending a game due to fear of violence or intimidation.
I can't provide a commentary on ongoing discussions, but we will provide what is necessary alongside the other relevant authorities in order to ensure that the fans can attend. I think it's unacceptable to have ended up in a position where away fans are unable to attend for the reasons that have been cited, and therefore we have a role to play, but other relevant authorities in the West Midlands will also be taking this into account.
Take you back to Crumpsall. Our Chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam is there for us. And Greg, just tell us more about what the King's expected to do over the coming hours.
Yeah, as you were saying, he arrived here with some suitably Manchester weather to welcome him. Saw those flowers, the wall of flowers that has been building here for more than 2 weeks since that attack. Met by the rabbi here, Daniel Walker, as he looked along that line of flowers and then heading inside, where he is now meeting senior members of the synagogue, and will also meet some of those who were here on the day, including, we understand, Yoni Finley, who was one of those who was injured and survived that attack on October the 2nd. It's part of the continued support for the Jewish community, is how the palace has described this visit, those impacted by the attack, to show support to the community. It is more than 2 weeks ago since what happened here, and in the very place that the King was walking today, that attempt by that attacker to drive his car at members of the community, to then attack them with a knife, killing 2 members of the Jewish community. And of course the harrowing events of that day is still very raw for people in this community. We've spoken to them over the past couple of weeks, and it clearly is something that many people feared would happen. They talked about that, one describing how they were shouting for help and that it didn't come, and that attack did take place. So I think a welcome show of support from some of those who saw the King arrive here, shouts of support for him being here, gratitude for him being here. As I say, is currently meeting senior members of the synagogue and also some of those who are here on that day to hear their story of what happened.
Greg, good to have you with us. The developments on that story to come through the course of the afternoon. Just time to bring you up to speed on the weather now. The rest of the month, pretty unsettled. Widespread showers, more prolonged rain and colder into the course of the weekend. This afternoon, most places can expect near average temperatures, windy near the Channel, England, Wales, eastern parts of Ireland and Northern Ireland seeing blustery showers. Temperatures in the mid-teens, concentrated in the south, those showers, where there'll be some thundery downpours possible. They'll become more isolated over western parts. Elsewhere, mostly fine. A few showers around. Shetland and the far northwest of Scotland look wet. Locally, heavy showers running across most parts tonight, becoming largely confined to the west later. Light winds in the north might lead to some patchy fog. Still to come here on Sky News through the course of the afternoon. We're going to bring you the details on that situation regarding the internet outage. It looks as though most services being brought back online. The government say they're in contact with Amazon Web Services. There's full details on the Sky News website and app. Stick with us for the full story.
Hello, you're watching Sky News Today with me, Jane Secker. It's 1 o'clock. These are the headlines. Breaking news, King Charles arrives in Manchester to meet those affected by the synagogue attack earlier this month. A huge outage takes Amazon, Snapchat and a wide range of other internet services offline, including those of HMRC, Halifax and Lloyds. US Vice President J.D. Vance will fly to Israel tomorrow to help reinforce the increasingly fragile Gaza peace deal. The race is on to find the gang who stole priceless jewels from the Louvre in a daring daylight heist. Donald Trump tells Ukraine to end the war based on current battle lines, as the Kremlin says it's continuing to work with the US on a Ukraine peace deal. Plus, gangsters, billionaires and love triangles. We go behind the scenes of China's 2-minute micro-drama boom. Hello, good afternoon. We begin in Manchester, where King Charles is visiting the Heaton Park Hebrew congregation in Crumpsall. He was greeted in the last few minutes by Rabbi Daniel Walker. On the 2nd of October, 35-year-old Jihad al-Shami drove his car at people outside the synagogue who were gathering for the holy day of Yom Kippur. He then attacked others with a knife and tried to storm the building wearing a fake suicide belt. Armed police shot him dead. 2 people were killed in the attack, 66-year-old Melvin Kravitz and 53-year-old Adrian Dalby. Well, our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, is there at the synagogue in Crumpsall. And Greg, just explain a little bit about why the King came today.
Well, the message from the palace is that the King wanted to show his continued support to the Jewish community and to those impacted by that attack on October the 2nd. He's currently inside the synagogue. He has met some of the senior leadership of the synagogue. He is also, during his time here, due to meet one of the survivors at least, a man called Yoni Finley, who was in hospital for some time with his injuries, to talk to him and his family. We've seen them here today, but to show that support to the community. He arrived a little early, actually, just in time for a Manchester downpour, but spent time with Rabbi Daniel Walker looking at the flowers. There's a wall of flowers that's been growing here since the immediate days after that attack on October the 2nd, showing the feeling in this community. And it is still a harrowing moment for this community. The events they've held since that attack have shown the strength of feeling that's here. Rabbi Walker himself talking about how evil tried to defile the steps of this synagogue on that day, and calling for a deep resolve and saying evil would not prevail in this community. So the King meeting some of those who are here, bringing that support as he said he wanted to. Of course, it's something he's talked about in January on the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, talking about the re-emergence of anti-Semitism in the world today. Clearly something he wanted to reflect on then, and with the community here and with some of those who were here and were affected by what happened on October the 2nd.
And Greg, you talked about how the community is still reeling there. What is the feeling down there? What is the atmosphere like?
I think there are multiple emotions that many people still feel, and talking to people here a week on from that attack, there was obviously still a great deal of sadness for the lives that were lost, a great deal of vulnerability and some anger. Some of the leaders of the synagogue talking about the anger they felt because they say they warned about just this kind of attack taking place. They felt they weren't listened to, and the result was that people lost their lives on that day. I think they recognise there has been a national response to that. They believe there is real determination to change things, but until they see that change, I think people still feel very vulnerable, and that was very clear. It was a very difficult day for this community. It's a very diverse community. Obviously, it has the synagogue, but it's a very multiracial community, multi-faith community, and it was felt very, very fiercely by a lot of people who live in this area, and still is. And when the King arrived, it was interesting. The small crowd who were here did shout their appreciation, their gratitude for him being here. And I think that is clear. It's a community that is still hurting, and one that believes there is more to be done on the central issue of how it was able to happen.
Greg, thank you very much. A major internet outage has been affecting dozens of websites, online games and apps, including Amazon, Snapchat and Vodafone. Issues started this morning and problems appear to be related to an issue at Amazon Web Services. They say their services have now mostly recovered. A number of banks have been among the online services affected. Well, the government released this statement. They said, "We are aware of an incident affecting Amazon Web Services and several online services which rely on their infrastructure. Through our established incident response arrangements, we're in contact with the company who are working to restore services as quickly as possible." Well, let's get the latest from our correspondent, Amelia Harper. So, Amelia, it seems like stuff is starting to come back online.
Yeah, we're very much in the recovery phase after, this huge internet outage affecting websites, games and apps. And we are now told that this underlying issue, the root cause of this, has now been resolved, and we are starting to see the hundreds of websites affected returning to normal. We started to hear about this through the website Down Detector, where people like you and I can log on to report issues or a website not working. And hundreds of websites were reported as having issues from roughly 8:30 this morning, including big sites like Snapchat, as well as Amazon and even the government website gov.uk. At one point, there were over 5,000 reports of Snapchat not working. We also heard from some individuals using internet banking, with banking platforms having some issues at Lloyds Bank, Halifax and Bank of Scotland. There were also issues with HMRC. When I had a look at them, it seemed that some websites and apps and games were working and some weren't. For example, for me, Amazon was working, the government website was working, Ancestry.com working, but what wasn't working were sites like Zoom, MyFitnessPal and ticket site Eventbrite. And this cause has been identified, as you mentioned, by retail giant Amazon's cloud computing service called Amazon Web Services. And AWS provides on-demand cloud computing services over the internet. And just in layman's terms, this essentially means that companies will rent storage or databases and servers instead of actually using or creating and maintaining their own physical hardware. This AWS underpins, many companies, and so when we see an issue with this system, it's going to impact not just one, but impact many. Now, the tech and the details of how this actually was caused is a little bit complicated, but we'll keep it very simple. Amazon Web Services initially released a statement saying they had increased error rates and latencies, and they said they identified the potential root cause, and they said this was an issue related to, or we understand since, this is an issue related to the processes that allow companies to connect with their servers. And they said in a statement, based on our investigation, the issue appears to be related to DNS resolution of the DynamoDB API endpoint in US East 1. DNS resolution relates to that process where companies can, or in this case, couldn't connect to their servers. US East 1 relates to services hosted by data centers in Northern Virginia in the United States, meaning that this outage today stemmed from those centers. We can hear a little bit more about this DNS resolution from technology journalist Chris Stoker-Walker.
This DNS system is effectively the system that translates skynews.com into a series of numbers called your internet protocol or IP address. The IP address is the way that the web works effectively, knowing where to route you on the whole of the internet in order to serve you your website. So the issue that we've identified with Amazon saying that they've had problems with this DNS resolution is effectively an inability to translate those basic terms of the words into the numbers that get you to an actual website. And that might seem like it's not a huge issue, but that is a problem because obviously that results in people not being able to log on to websites.
Well, Amazon Web Services has been providing updates through the morning. They have certainly said that they have had engineers working hard to try to fix this. It appears now that they have, but they have said there will probably be a little bit of a backlog. Some individuals we know are still experiencing some issues with some websites or apps or games, but hopefully throughout the day that should continue to improve.